Thank you very much. Thank you, Larry, for this very kind introduction. Thank you, Hisham. Thank you for organizing this. It's a great honor to be here with you today, to be in this beautiful campus in Stanford. I said 2 years after my first visit, accompanying my son to the summer camp that he had. He's 15 years old, and Stanford does also provide this very interesting course for very young people. So thank you for being here today to listen, to debate, to discuss to what is happening in Tunisia, a very small dot on the globe, and compared to other priorities like Asia, like what is happening in Ukraine and other very hot spots in the world. But maybe I'll succeed to give you a different perspective on what is happening in Tunisia and why it is important, maybe to follow up very closely what is happening there, and also to have I do believe that the US commitment in that part of the world is important to change things and make them happen and being a success. I hope that the Middle East and North Africa won't be just about containment and bad news, but also some success stories that could in the future be replicated in the whole region. Many Tunisian politicians used to say, if Tunisia fails, then it's bad news for the whole region. For us, failure is not an option. So we need to succeed. This is about Tunisia transition to democracy and youth inclusion mainly. So 4 years after the revolution, we are rediscovering that youth inclusion is crucial. It's key to success. It was at the origin of the revolution in Tunisia 4 years ago. This feeling of frustration, exclusion, that it all started with the youth being overwhelmed with this sentiment of frustration, of isolation. The system used to be very, very selective. The old dictatorship used to have its own network of people helping people economically, socially, also for safety net. It was very, very selective. So those who were not in the system felt excluded, and this was for years and years and years until this famous vendor in the street. We had similar events, tragic events, even before him and after him. But that day, that triggered the revolution and a sentiment of enough is enough. So this revolution was also about massive unemployment, mostly among young people. 85% of the unemployed were between 15 and 35 years old. And different polls analyzed what triggered really the revolution, and many polls answered that the revolution was induced by young people. 96% found that the young people triggered the revolution, and 85% found that unemployed triggered the revolution, and disadvantage or 87%. So that gives you a little bit to understand how youth exclusion was felt with bitterness. This is a map of Tunisia. So what triggered, I said, the revolution is unemployment, but also regional disparities. You have the rich coastal regions from Bizerte, Tunis, Sousse, Sfax, all those were touristic rich regions, and along the frontier with Algeria and the frontier with Libya, those are the regions that are suffering the most. So regional disparity was also an important ingredient in the revolution. And now it's also a concern for smuggling and informal sector, which now in Tunisia is 40% of GDP. So it's, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to patrol the frontier. We have more than 1,000 kilometers with Algeria and more than 500 with Libya kilometers. And when we say smuggling, we say also terrorism. We say all kind of dangers that can affect Tunisia and destabilize Tunisia. So, adding on that, the economy was affected by the instability in Libya, by the potential instability in Algeria. We do not know what will happen after Bouteflika, the Algerian president, who is currently very sick. So this is a big question mark, what will happen with Algeria. And then, as you know, the Eurozone is weak, our main trading partner, so the exports, Tunisian exports to the Eurozone has been affected also and had an impact on our revenue and our growth, economic growth. So as I said, exclusion and frustration are really the main causes of the problem in Tunisia. Currently, 4 years after the revolution, the ingredients are still the same. We still have massive unemployment. We still have regional disparity. Corruption is increased if we compare with before the revolution. So all the ingredients are there. I would say it is even worse now with terrorism that is shaking the country. Investments are low. The debt ratio, the indebtedness of Tunisia is very high, was still acceptable, below 60%. So the situation is not really rosy, the least we could say. And then, after one important element is that after the revolution there was an enthusiasm among the young Tunisian, maybe naively, that everything will change overnight, that once we topple the dictator, everything will be solved, that there will be massive better life, better decent work, more jobs for everybody, more opportunity for everybody. And I think there is now a disillusion that it is even worse than before. There are some polls who indicated that a high share of Tunisian people who would like to see the dictator back, because yes, it's they think that at least before they had a decent life, in the sense that it was not scary. What happened with the terrorist attack and the last one in the Museum of Bardo on March 18th really put Tunisia in trouble, in the sense that we were not used to that kind of terrorist attack. It's there is nothing worse than being used to something that changed your life, your daily life. We had some attacks along the frontiers with Algeria, where military were attacked and killed, but the Museum of Bardo attack was really the first one in the city, in the capital, affecting tourism, affecting Tunisians. So it was that may explain why now there is this change of attitude, that the revolution did not solve the problems. On the contrary, the revolution made it worse for the people, and they saw also that even the Islamists of Al-Nahda, who they elected in the first election and led the government, did not do. Their achievements were relatively low in comparison with their expectations. So all these elements to say that we had, after the revolution, 3 years of political struggle, which ended up with a technocratic government, where the Islamists of Al-Nahda stepped down to let the technocratic government to lead the country, and then we had finally the second free elections, which now we have a new government, the first elected government ruling the country since the beginning of this year, and we do hope that finally, with a strong government, elected government, that they will implement the necessary reform, but we will come to reforms. So just to tell you that among the indicators of this enthusiasm after the revolution among the youth, we had more than 4,000 or 5,000 NGOs that were created after the revolution. 5,000 NGOs, which is amazing by number, and not all of them, of course, were successful. They were different in kind and in terms of scopes and objectives, but nevertheless, now there is like an NGO fatigue. We'll come back to it, and we'll come back to it when I discuss about what we are doing with the Mediterranean Development Initiative. So to summarize what I just said, we can say that the aspirations of the younger generation that sparked sweeping changes in Tunisia remain unmet. So this is the what we could. This is the diagnostic 4 years after. And among the consequences that we are seeing is that more and more young people are trying to escape, to cross the Mediterranean, to find a better life in Europe. And very often it ends up with tragedy. The last disaster, this is an article from yesterday, USA Today, I think, that talk about more than 800 people who died in the Mediterranean Sea, trying to cross the sea to reach Italian island Lampedusa, which is the closest point to Africa. So we will continue to see these tragedies again and again and again, and the Mediterranean Sea once was the really, how can I say, the source of prosperity. Now is becoming like a cemetery for these young people who are trying to escape for a better life, for a decent life that they cannot find in their own homeland. Not talking about those who are going to Syria and to other parts of the world to do jihad, which is a main concern also for Tunisia. Tunisia, if you know, maybe you know it, is, I think, #1 Arab country sending jihadists to Syria and to other parts of the conflict in the Middle East. So that was a concern. We'll try to understand why, but it's very difficult to say why and to understand the different reasons. But let's say that Tunisia is in between, in transition between once a very strong dictatorship who used to really control the country, and a new democracy where in the beginning the Islamist-led government were reluctant to use the same methods on these people to prevent them to go to Syria, So they were really lenient on this Islamist radicalists, and they only it took them at least after the attack, the very sad attack on the U.S. embassy, to realize that they need to change method. Otherwise, they are completely disqualified. They're losing the game. So at some point, the radicalists in Tunisia attacked the U.S. embassy in Tunisia. Hopefully, with a very small toll. 3 or 4 demonstrators were killed, but nothing. It was not at this scale of what happened in Benghazi in Libya. But it was a waking call also for the Islamists to change attitude, and finally they declared the Ansar al-Sharia, the Islamist radical group, as terrorists, and they changed their attitude. So again, this is now a phenomenon that should be addressed, and we'll come back to it with the EU and with the US, how to because one of the conclusion of this analysis is to say that Tunisia on her own will not be able to address this situation. But we'll come to it. This is an important point in my speech, to say that although the onus is on our shoulders, if we do not receive the necessary support from US and EU, we will not make it. We'll come back to it and also during the discussion. So, in this context, the MDI, the Mediterranean Development Initiative, my Tunisia-based think tank, decided to identify and analyze the key barriers to youth inclusion. So what we have done is that we have gathered 500 young Tunisians that we have in our platform, on our youth platform, and I told them, take the recent report of the World Bank on called Removing Barriers to Youth Inclusion, read it, discuss it, analyze it, and discuss the diagnostic, the causes, and the recommendations. I gave them 1 month to read it and to discuss it between them, and then we organized a big conference in a university in Tunis, where they presented what they found. They discussed it with other students that were invited in front of people from the private sector, from the government, and from civil society. And the idea was to provide recommendation for policy and programming and how to address such barriers. MDI, so let me maybe briefly tell you what is MDI. MDI is a Tunisia NGO born after the revolution, after the free elections we had in 2011. And the idea is to function, to work on 3 pillars: the private sector and regional integration in North Africa, the youth platform, and women empowerment. So these are, in our sense, the 3 priorities to make Tunisia a successful country. Today, our focus is on youth inclusion, which is really, as I said before, we are rediscovering that youth empowerment is very crucial. You know, during we had 2 elections in Tunisia, and in both elections, the young who went to vote was below 10%. So there is really a disillusion or a lack of trust with the institutions. We'll see that something is happening that prevents youth to feel inspired or engaged in the civic life in this election. So they are completely absorbed by their daily life, their problems, and they don't feel like participating. We are talking about the youth aged between 15 and 29 make up 29% of Tunisia's total population and 43% of the working age population, age 15 to 59. So it's really an important category in the pyramid of age in Tunisia. And when we talk about the inclusion of youth, we need to talk about multiple dimensions of exclusion. We discussed about the economic dimension, which is the income level, people who are youth who are dropping out of school. This is also an important phenomenon that we are observing in Tunisia that we didn't have before. Although education is compulsory until the age of 16, we have many people who are abandoning, many youth who are abandoning school. The employment status, well, you know, when we talk about youth inclusion, the main subject is employment, but there is more than employment in the exclusion of youth. An important element is the trust in the institutions. I think that what happened after the revolution and the 3 years of political instability and the political assassination that we had in Tunisia, the fight between Islamists, leftists, and all these really made the youth lack trust with the institution and with politicians. For them, they have already the same feeling as other youth in the world, that politicians are only taking care of positions, power, and you know, so themselves. So they are already sharing the same feeling. And security, conflict, and violence. This is very much important now, especially now that we are ramping up our counter-terrorism measures. This lack of trust and dialogue between the youth and police is of concern. We'll see that it is among the recommendations that we are putting forward is to install a dialogue between police and the youth, for them to understand that the role of police, why police is, you know, it's very much important to have this dialogue. And interesting indicators that was this is from the World Bank report, is the NEET indicator. So the NEET indicator is the rate of young people who are not in education, not in employment or training. The share of NEETs goes beyond the narrow definition of youth unemployment, which does not include young people who have been discouraged from looking for work. So this figure presents an overview of NEET rates for Tunisians of working age, comparing young Tunisians 15 to 29 to those aged 30 and above. Throughout the country, young men are about 2.5 times more likely to be NEET than men above 30, which gives you an idea about the obstacles that are facing the very young people. And young women are really twice as often affected by NEET than young men, despite the fact that Tunisia boasts to be the #1 Arab countries for women's rights and women gender equality and so on. The situation of women on the ground is far from being good. This is one of the striking outcome from this report. what is the way forward? As you know, we have a new constitution that was passed in January 2014, and one element in it enshrines youth participation as a key pillar for social, economic, and political development in the country. So we have really the framework to work on youth inclusion, but for this article of the Constitution to be implemented and to be a fact, it entails really a lot of work. So we are working on that. So we all agree that we need to support the transition of Tunisian youth from protest to active citizenship. So this is also one of our concerns. And the needs as a category most affected by economic exclusion, we need to ensure their socio-economic integration through tailored policy and programming. So I think that to summarize, the diagnostic, there is no argument or a disagreement on the diagnostic. We have a problem with youth inclusion, with creating jobs, and the main element is a mismatch between the labor offer and demand, a lack of skills. So we are producing Tunisia diplomas that lacks skills, that are not ready for the working market. We have really a very rigid labor market. It's very costly to hire. It's very costly to fire. All these elements, which we know, have one solution: reforms. We need to reform the labor market. We need to reform the education system, which is producing, which is not answering for the demand of the labor market. Recently, we had a big investor in the meat market in Tunisia, a big Tunisian Saudi investor. He's opening more than 2,000 shops all over Tunisia to sell meat. And he starts from raising from the cattle to the consumption. He acknowledged that he couldn't find even one profile that he needs. So what he's doing is training. He's hiring people, young people, and training them. He has no other solution. Somebody else told us that usually he hires engineers. He said he used to work in Germany. He said in Germany, in 6 months, when he hired a young engineer, he's ready in 6 months, fully operational. In Tunisia, it takes him between 1 year and 2 years to have somebody who is fully operational. So these are really key elements to understand why there is a problem, how to remove those problems. And again and again and again, economic reforms are a key word for Tunisia success. This is, I like to call it the Gordian knot to our success. How to reform, how to implement these reforms, what should be the incentives and the motivation to implement these reforms. 3 years of Troika, that was the Islamist-led government, did not fail to implement these reforms. 1 year of technocratic government failed to implement these reforms. So now the hope is within this new government that finally they will feel empowered to address this reform. My point of view, and this is my personal point of view, as I said before, is that although the onus is on our shoulders, we need incentives to do this. I like to, and when I say incentives, is a vision, in fact, a bold vision. What we are missing is really a vision where we want to be in 20 years and how. I like to take the example of Eastern and Central European countries. After the end of communism, they were in the same situation, maybe in a better situation, because the economic prospects, the economic situation of Europe at that time was better. They were not weakened as the Eurozone is now. But they completely they proposed a framework for these Eastern and European countries that is not proposed to Tunisia, and we understand why, because the incentive was the EU accession. Becoming member of the European Union was a powerful incentive for Eastern and Central European countries to undertake painful reforms. Now in Tunisia, the politicians start calculating what would be the cost of implementing reforms, and the country is still very, very weak, vulnerable, fragile to undertake to cut subsidies. For example, let's take one of the reforms: cutting subsidies. We subsidize oil, we subsidize sugar, wheat, and other primary food stuff. I don't imagine Tunisia cutting subsidies overnight. It will be another revolution. So how to reform? How to change the situation? I don't have the answer. My thinking is that there should be a partnership, a vision with the key partners like the EU to help Tunisia as they helped the new members that they have. For example, let's compare also with the financial support that the EU gave Eastern and European countries. For example, let's start before that. Let's start with Greece. When Greece became member of the EU, they had around 500 euros per capita per year of financial aid. 500 euros per capita per year. Then Eastern and Central European countries, Poland, for example, after the Copenhagen summit in 2002, they were given approximately 60 euros per capita per year for Poland. Now Tunisia currently is receiving 14 euros per capita per year from the EU. So in 2014, the EU granted Tunisia something like 180 million euros, and from the and the figure is approximately the same on the US side. So what I'm saying, what should be our vision? I consider Tunisia in its regional environment, North Africa. We really need to work on regional integration. And although the situation is far from being easy in North Africa, as we know, Libya is in a total mess. Algeria is, let's say that we don't know what will happen in Algeria, but I hope that it will follow the Moroccan path of reforms. The situation between Algeria and Morocco there is no dialogue between them. So what we are advocating for is to focus on the cross-border regions, to create special zones between Tunisia and Libya, Tunisia and Algeria, that could pave the way to more of a regional integration in North Africa. As far as Morocco and Algeria are concerned, maybe set up an economic corridor like India and Pakistan to resume relationship between them. And trade is a powerful tool that can mend relationships. So this is a hope, and this can only be dealt with only by the private sector. That's why we have created within MDI what we call the Business Advisory Council for North Africa, which gather businessmen from the region in order to have a dialogue between them and brainstorm about what could be the way forward. Then the EU we need to strengthen the relationship between Tunisia and the EU, the main trading partner. Now the EU has launched public consultation about its neighborhood policy. You know, the neighborhood policy after the enlargement, the last enlargement of the EU, they devised this neighborhood policy, which is, in fact, the framework of cooperation between the EU and its southern and eastern neighbors. That also should be revised. I believe that you cannot have in the same basket countries who will join the EU in the future and countries who cannot join the EU. You cannot treat with the same instrument Tunisia and Ukraine, and we saw it. There are totally different perspectives, and also I'm advocating for a privileged relationship between the US and Tunisia. We have just started the strategic dialogue, and I do hope that we will reach the US-Tunisia free trade agreement, which also will be a powerful signal for Tunisia. Finally, our motto is to have an impact. We did not create the MDI to train 20 people or to help 50 young Tunisians. We really would like to have an impact. To have an impact means really to think, to be ambitious in the way you are thinking. That's why we are in touch with the authority here in the United States, in Europe, to try to have this high-level dialogue and try to bring pragmatic solutions for Tunisia. My ideal would be to have a big networks of youth in Tunisia to be able to bring their voices on all the issues they are concerned with. They need massive training, skills and soft skills, and explore also how technology can be an instrument of inclusion and enable the youth. We do believe that technological skills can really help going forward and very rapidly, in fact, because 4 years of transition after the revolution, we have lost a lot of time, energy, and we are really backwards. Just to take an example, for example, Tunisia used to be the competitor of Morocco for phosphate, and we have lost. We used to have more than $1 billion of export of phosphate, and now since the revolution we are 10% of that amount every year. To tell you that we are really losing time and energy and money, and all this money, waste of money, is not creating jobs, is creating more problems. So the key word is to have an impact. Thank you. You can follow us on our. We are using very much Facebook to communicate, and our website page is being revised, so it's not able, but this is the best way to follow us. Thank you very much for your attention, and